Das ist der Elektroautomobil-Podcast
mit Markus Zacher
und Valentin Bus. Heute haben wir mal wieder einen englischsprachigen Gast, der uns gleich etwas über Reifen für Elektrobusse erzählen wird. Aber bevor wir ins Englische wechseln, noch kurz der Hinweis, dass nach dem Interview ein kleiner Blick in die neue Ausgabe des Printmagazins gegeben wird. Jetzt aber erstmal viel Spaß mit dem Interview. In our podcast, we've already talked about the importance of tires, not only for a car's grip and safety, but also for, of course, the energy efficiency and even the noise levels. But what happens if you need to develop a tire for a much larger electric vehicle, for example, a bus?
Yeah, to learn about the challenges in developing this special kind of tire, we invited an expert to our podcast who works for one of the largest tire manufacturers in the world, Hankook.
Yeah, so welcome to our show, Guy Heywood.
Well, first of all, thank you, Marcus and Valentin, for the opportunity to speak to you today and also speak to your listeners at Elektro-Automobile. I am passionate about the subject of tyres. I've been in the industry for more than 30 years now in factories, in sales marketing roles, in product development roles. So I think I know a little bit about tyres, a little bit about our industry, but I am more excited than ever in my career because honestly, I see more change coming in the next few years in our industry, particularly around vehicle developments, than we've seen in the last 30 or so years. So it's an exciting time to be in the tyre game, to be in the mobility game, and also it's an exciting time, I think, to be inside of Hankook. You mentioned, I guess your readers perhaps don't know so much about Hankook. It is one of the largest manufacturers in the world. We're also probably the fastest growing global company in the world, and here in Europe, we're the fastest growing truck and bus business here in Europe. Big ambition also to try and grow further and try and develop our products much further, and hopefully we'll get the chance to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing specifically for the electric vehicles that we're now seeing arriving on the European roads and into the European market.
Yeah, now you already told all our listeners something about Hankook. I think many of them probably will know them from the cars tires. But you also recently presented a new product, especially for commercial vehicles, electric commercial vehicles. And what's the strategic approach behind this launch of EV tires for commercial vehicles and not only focusing on passenger cars?
Well, you're right. I mean, if we look at the market today, I think around 15% of all of the registrations of cars in Europe are electric cars, battery electric cars. So it was logical for Hankook to start our electric vehicle car launch with in the car segment, and we launched our Ion range in 2021, 2022. It takes a little bit more time for the electric vehicles to arrive in the truck and bus market. Today, if you look at trucks, last year it was only less than 3% of registrations were battery. But if you look at the bus segment, the urban bus segment, it was close to 30% across the whole of Europe, and in some places, like the Nordics, it's close to 100% that are battery electric today. So it's logical that when we moved into developing specific products for electric vehicles, we started with car. And it's also logical today that now we're expanding into the bus segment because of that faster adoption rate of those electric buses into the marketplace. So we've launched, as you mentioned, very recently, our new eSmart range, which is a new range specifically designed for those new generation of vehicles, those new electric battery vehicles or hybrid vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into the specifics of heavy commercial vehicles, could you first maybe again explain what the difference between tires for conventional and for electric vehicles are?
Yeah, I think the truth is that they're very, very different. When you look at the actual vehicle design, you'll see in an electric vehicle, obviously we don't have the engine, we have batteries. Those batteries are very heavy. We see 10 to 20% increased weight for an electric vehicle over in a conventional engine-powered vehicle, which can be 2 tons or more added weight for a commercial vehicle. The actual acceleration and the force that the tires have to pass and have to convert into movement is significantly higher We know already the acceleration rate of EV cars. It's a similar story in the commercial vehicles. They're accelerating faster. The weight means the cornering forces are significantly higher. The deceleration forces for the tires are significantly higher. The axle weights are higher. The other factor is the actual noise, particularly in urban transportation, in buses, in urban environments. The people inside of the bus don't want to hear noise from the road or from the engine or from the tires. Range anxiety is a definite factor, where the distance, how far you can travel on one battery charge, is a factor, and we want to try and make sure we maximize that. And obviously all the other things that we see in all traditional vehicles around safety, around maximizing mileage, is still evident in electric vehicles. And as the vehicles develop further, we'll start to see semi-autonomous and eventually fully autonomous vehicles. And that's when we're going to also see a new revolution in tires, where the tires will have sensors inside to communicate with the vehicle around things like road condition. The vehicle needs to know if it's icy, if it's wet, if the road conditions are not ideal, and it will adjust the speed accordingly, because it will be making decisions about speed and braking and cornering, and it won't be a driver doing that. So this is the kind of thing that's happening right now. Electric vehicles are very different, and in the future they're going to become even more different as we move towards more autonomy in the electric vehicles that are available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just also mentioned now the tires for buses. So what are like the typical requirements for this kind of electric or for this kind of vehicle? So where do these bus tires differ from the passenger cars tires? Our listeners probably know from the cars.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. I mean, I believe, and I think Hankook's belief is, that there really isn't a huge difference between a bus tire, a coach tire, and a general B2B truck or trailer tire. Some people talk about the fact there is a need for improved safety because of the precious cargo that the buses are actually carrying people. But honestly, inside of Hankook, all cargoes are precious. We don't compromise on safety for any of the applications. So safety is a given. We have to ensure safety of tires. The mileage is a factor, certainly in the urban bus environment, predominantly because a lot of those bus fleets are actually operating under cost per kilometre contracts, which means that you have to maximise the mileage to reduce the cost per kilometre. Another factor, I think, for the bus fleets is that they do need to have mobility in all weathers. Buses have to travel in snow, in ice, in wet and dry conditions. So the tyres that are fitted have to be able to operate in all of those conditions. Another factor is sidewall protection. All buses tend to approach the curbs, stop at the curbs in all of the cities as they're letting passengers on and off the vehicle, and that means that they do rub against the side of the road, and that does give sidewall wear, which is very unique to urban applications. So generally, urban tyres have extra rubber depth on the sidewall to allow for some wear before there is any kind of damage to the internal structure of the tyre. All the rest of it, in terms of the environmental factors, the safety factors I said, are all very much the same as we would see in a normal traditional tyre for a truck or a bus or a coach. We want to reduce wear rate, we want to maximise mileage, we want to reduce the rolling resistance to give much better mileage performance and reduce CO2. All of those are things that we try to do in all tyres. The specifics really are around the noise, around the sidewall protection, and around the fact that we want to try and maximise mileage to reduce the CPK, the cost per kilometre. They're the factors I think that are unique for the bus segment.
And you mentioned that the bus has to go at any weather. So are there specific like summer or winter tires for buses, or is it one size fits all? One tire has to operate in all of these conditions throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for 80 to probably 90% of the buses that are rolling around Europe, they're not switching from summer to winter tyres because the climatic conditions don't vary so much. Obviously, here in Germany and in the Nordics, we do have very, very significant winters. So we do have to consider having winter tyres specifically fitted to certain buses that are going up into the more wintry conditions. So we do have winter tyre ranges. But in most cases, 90%, as I said, that people are using the same tyre through summer, through winter, through wet, through dry conditions, which is why we talk about the need for mobility in all conditions in that urban bus segment. So we design our tyres to make sure that they give wet grip in all those conditions. And a new innovation, and I guess we'll get a chance to talk about it a little bit later, is 3D printed tyres, which enables us to give grip not only when the tyre is new, but also to give wet grip and traction when the tyre is partially or fully worn, because 3D printing allows you to hide grooves and holes underneath the initial tread pattern. And those are revealed as the tyre wears, which means that we do have that wet grip, even when the tyre is at 2/3 or almost fully worn condition, to give that mobility in all weathers. So that's a innovation that we've recently developed, only in the last probably 18 months. And today we're applying that innovation to our EV-specific tyres, but also to our internal combustion engine tyres for the whole of the market. Today, something like 90% of all the tyres we sell are 3D printed in the tread patterns. So, we have winter tyres, but I think most of the applications are using just our standard tyre. But because of those innovations in technologies, we can get grip all the way through the life of the tyre and also in all conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the lifetime of the tire. So can you give us a number? What is typical for city bus or also for coach? What mileage do they achieve usually?
That's an almost impossible question to answer, because it really does depend a lot on the application, on the bus type, the application, the size, the distances, the loads, the gradients, the temperatures. And I could give you a figure of 200,000 kilometers, which would be very accurate for some fleets, and it could only be 140 for other fleets that have much more punishing applications. So I can say that the new generation of tires that we're launching and we're talking about on this podcast, the AU56 eSmart tires, are 20% improved mileage over our previous generation, which is the AU4 Plus tire. So we're talking about huge gains in mileage performance by leveraging new technologies around AI, around 3D, and also new materials. So we're combining those three very fast and rapidly advancing technologies. We're combining those three to give us the ability to be able to improve the performance of our products by huge amounts, 20% in mileage, 15% in rolling resistance, wet grip, 10-15% improved. In the 30 years I've been in this industry, I've been seeing new evolutions of tires showing 1 or 2% improvement. And that was the norm. Now we're seeing 20% improvement in multiple areas of application because of those new technologies. So the game is changing very, very quickly. And today we're able to offer much, much better mileages, but also better fuel efficiency, better rolling resistance, lower noise, all at the same time in the same tire, which is a game changer, quite honestly, in the industry.
That's really interesting, because from the outside, the tires still look the same, more or less. So you wouldn't expect to have these huge innovations after decades of tires being built the same way, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think if you speak to most people, they would say tires are all black and round.
Yeah.
And this is true. They are all black and round, but they're very, very different. And I know when you get into this industry and you start to understand that there are more than 200 components in a truck tire, 200 different materials and components, the technology is incredible. But the thing that's really changing, and we started this conversation by talking about the revolution in vehicles, which is definitely happening. We're moving to decarbonization of our mobility industry through electric vehicles, etc. And that's a big revolution. At the same time, we've got a revolution in tires. The good news is, because of technology advancements, we've got the enabling technologies to deliver tires which are significantly better than ever before. AI is a new technology. 3D printing is new technology. A lot of the new materials we're using in our tires today, and the tires we're talking about 37% sustainable, those materials are brand new also. So those three key technologies mean that we're able to make step changes in our performance. So it's a completely different world to the world that I've been used to for most of my 30 years in the industry. And as I said at the start, it's probably the most exciting time if you are in the mobility industry, because of all of those changes coming and the technologies that are helping us to do quite crazy things in tire design and vehicle design and the general environment we all operate in. AI is a daily discussion on the news these days, and that's advancing so fast, and that's making things possible today that were impossible yesterday.
You mentioned the 3D printing, so probably can you try to explain it a little bit more to our listeners how this works? So I can't imagine so in detail how it works to 3D print a tire.
Yeah, I'd say I joined Hankook 6 years ago, and one of the first things that we did was to invest in 3D printed company. It's 3D metal printing, so we've all seen the plastic components that have been 3D printed for quite some time, but now we have technologies and companies which can print in metal and print in large-scale metal items. And we recognized quite early that there was an opportunity to actually start printing the molds that we use to produce our tires using 3D. when you're a traditional tyre designer, and I've been in the industry for 30 years, the tyre designers are compromising on what they want to do with tread patterns because you have to be able to machine make the mold. And the mold is the opposite. It's the negative of the tread pattern. A bit like a jelly mold, you get the opposite. And you put the jelly into the mold, the jelly is the opposite of the mold you put it into. And it's the same for a tyre. So when you want a really detailed tread pattern, it was impossible to do that because you couldn't machine make the mold. It was impossible to produce the mold. With 3D printing, you don't have that constraint. You can design any kind of tread pattern, and the 3D printer will print that tread pattern. It can produce very intricate tread molds that we couldn't make before using normal machining process. So today, our tyre designers are producing tread patterns which have features that are hidden underneath the tread pattern. So it looks like a normal tyre when it's new, but then as it starts to wear, you'll see new grooves and new holes and new channels arriving in the tyre that weren't visible when the tyre was new. And those channels, grooves and holes, when they're in the new condition, you have air and water circulating inside of the tyre, like air conditioning. And what that means is if you keep the tyre cold by having air and water circulating, you can reduce the rolling resistance for the tyre and you can reduce the wear rate of the tyre. So you get better mileage, you get better fuel efficiency or better battery distance because of the air conditioning. And then as the tyre wears, those features are revealed, and those features then become gripping surfaces and water evacuation channels. So if you're in a wet condition, then the water can evacuate from underneath the tyre and give you grip in the wet conditions. If you didn't have 3D printed technology, that would be a tyre which is almost a slick tyre, and that means that the wet grip performance is compromised later in the tyre's life. So 3D printing is a game changer for us. We have what's called regenerative tread patterns today, and certainly in the tyre we're talking about, which is our eSmart AU56, that has 3D printed technology, and there are features that arrive in the tyre when it's 2/3 worn that you couldn't see when the tyre was in its new condition, and that's purely because of the 3D printing. So it's a complete game changer. Everything we produce now in ICE vehicles and EV vehicles is now 3D printed, and I think we're unique in that, and it means that our customers don't have to compromise about wet grip later in the tyre's life or fuel efficiency later in the tyre's life. You get that same performance from the first millimetre to the very last millimetre of tread wear. So that's a real game changer, 3D printing.
That's really wild, like air conditioning for tires. That's the first time I heard that. So you mentioned it's hard to tell how many kilometers a tire will be usable because it really depends on the vehicle using the tire, of course, and the use case where it's driven and everything. Are there different requirements also for the tires, for example, of city buses going slowly in city traffic and coaches going on the highways?
Yeah, I think there's a good reason why we see electric vehicle adoption being much higher in city buses than in coaches. And the real reason today is the fact that coaches are doing long distance travel, and that means that the battery charge will not be sufficient to be able to do the full journey without having to charge en route. And today in most of Europe, we have poor infrastructure for commercial vehicle charging. So the adoption today is happening in the applications where the vehicles are doing shorter distances, which is refuse vehicles and urban transportation. And that's the reason why we launch our first product specifically for that segment. As I mentioned, it's 30% of the vehicles registered are those urban vehicles. So when we look at those urban vehicles, they've got higher axle weights, more than 2 ton higher axle weights than a conventional vehicle because of the battery weights. They need much lower rolling resistance tyres because we want to try to maximize the distance you can travel with your battery charge. So we reduce the rolling resistance of the tyres. They need much more durability because of the torque, as I mentioned. The acceleration, deceleration, cornering forces are much, much higher. Our tyres have what we call baffle technology in them, meaning that we dampen the sound from the tyre because there is no engine noise inside of an urban bus. They're very quiet. You can have a conversation inside. And the second highest noise that you would hear in a normal vehicle is the tyres and the road noise. The first is obviously the engine. And in an electric vehicle, there is no engine, so it's all about the tyres. So we have to try to minimise the noise from our tyres. And these tyres we're talking about, the AU56, are category A rated, and the lowest noise rating in the marketplace, 72 decibels. So that's to try and make sure that the occupants of the bus don't get disturbed by noise from the tyres. And then we've got all those other factors about making sure that you have mobility in all weathers through use of 3D and use of AI designed tyres. So the tyres are very different. as I mentioned at the start of this, we've decided as a business to have EV-specific car products under the ION range and EV-specific truck products under our eSmart range, because the vehicles are so different. And that's a decision that we've made, which is a brave decision, but I think it's the right decision personally. And certainly from the feedback I get during the IAA and speaking to customers, they're very interested to understand more about why we have these EV-specific products and how they can help them to improve their operations.
I think the focus right now on the city buses is actually also clear, because we have many manufacturers in the market which are offering electric city buses. But for coaches, I think, the number of buses sold is very, very small. Also, many manufacturers don't even offer any kind of bus for this use case. But I think, this will probably also change in the future. And I guess many of the knowledge you put into these city buses is also applicable for coaches, I guess. So I think the targets are the same, to reduce the noise, to reduce the rolling resistance, and so on. I guess you also still have the technology you can use also for the coaches.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and if you look today, as I mentioned, the adoption rate is very high for urban, but it's not so high in coach, it's not so high in trucks either. And the real issue is the longevity of the battery, but that is rapidly advancing. Yeah. And also we're starting to see some infrastructure investments around Europe that will make it viable to have long-distance electric-powered vehicles. I saw the Tesla Semi vehicle, which was a demo at the IAA, and that has a range close to 1,000 kilometers on one charge. And that means that is a practical vehicle to use. And when we see coaches with that kind of battery distance, then I think we remove the anxiety around not being able to charge during the journey. And then you'll start to see the adoption of coach, and you'll start to see the adoption of heavy vehicles moving over to electric as we get the batteries developing more and more infrastructure arriving in Europe. So we'll see it rapidly increase. And our vision is that we will have a full range of eSmart products for all of those applications as the vehicles arrive. It makes no sense to develop them today because there is not that many in the marketplace. But as we see 20-30% adoption, then we will launch eSmart in regional applications, eSmart for coach, eSmart for urban applications. So that's our vision, specific product for the new EV mobility industry.
And you also mentioned AI. Of course, AI is everywhere nowadays, but how does that impact the development of tires?
That's a very good question. I think we all hear every day now about AI advancement. And I think I heard yesterday that we have AI models now that are more intelligent than Einstein. So it's advancing very, very quickly. And in the past, traditionally, the tire designers inside of all of the premium manufacturers were the most highly paid people in the organization, because they know how to optimize performance through making adjustments to tires. And they would modify the tires and design the tires on a computer. We would then make the tire, a real tire made out of real rubber, and we'd put that tire onto a truck or a car, and we would test the tire and see whether the changes that the designer had made were positive or negative in performance. Now, you can imagine that process can take months to actually get where results from a modification of a tire when it's on a vehicle can take 6 months. So to make optimized tires can take years of iterations of modifications. Today, with AI, we have the tire designers sitting, but also we have AI sitting alongside the tire designers. And the AI knows all of the changes that have been made in the history of Hankook, because we have all of that in our database. And it will make suggestions to the tire designers to say, maybe you should try this, maybe you can try that, because that worked in the past, maybe 10 years ago, with a previous tire designer that may no longer be working in Hankook. So as an aid for the tire designer to optimize and come up with new ideas about tire design, AI is already being used. Once they make the modification to the tire, whether it's a compound change, a design change, a tread pattern change, normally we would produce a real tire and test. Now we don't need to do that. We can use supercomputing to create a digital tire and put it onto a digital truck, and put that truck onto a digital road, or put that bus onto a digital road, and test the tire digitally. You can get data about the mileage performance, the wet grip performance, the fuel efficiency immediately from supercomputer models. So you can optimize the tire much, much quicker. You can make 10 changes in 5 minutes, where those 10 changes in the past might have taken 5 years to get the results. So AI is really accelerating optimization of tires, the design, the tread patterns, and the compounding. And then when we've finally got a tire that we believe is optimized, we would produce a real tire prototype, and we will test that as normal on trucks and buses on the road. But by that stage, we've already perhaps been through 20, 30, 40 iterations of design, which would have been impossible 2 or 3 years ago. We didn't have the supercomputing power and we didn't have the AI power. So that's an example of how technologies, alongside 3D, alongside new materials, can lead to improvement in performance of 20%. In the past, 2 or 3% was considered to be a huge step. Today, 20% is what's possible if you really invest in those technologies, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're investing in cloud computing, supercomputing, AI, 3D, and new materials. And that's the reason why the new generation of products, we're seeing 20, 30% improvement across many, many different areas of application. So AI is a new battleground for our industry, a really exciting innovation. And it's another reason why it's very exciting to be in our industry at this moment, because technology is making things possible that were impossible only maybe a few months ago.
Yeah. So your engineers still need to know what they are doing there, but they have the possibility just to have more ideas being checked if they will really advance the tire or not. And they can just get faster feedback if their new construction is probably better or not, and so on. And the AI is helping them to create these new kinds of idea how to improve the tire.
Yeah, AI is their friend today. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll be the enemy in the future, but today it's their friend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you very much for all the insights. And I think it was really astonishing to hear how much high tech is inside a tire. So like you said, it's not only black and round, it's even much more. It's a high tech product and can influence so many different parts or the behavior of the bus. So thank you very much for all these insights.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. And for those listeners out there that do have EV vehicles on order or existing in the fleet, I would recommend that you should look at EV specific products. Some people might be surprised to hear that 30% of the fuel you put in a commercial vehicle or bus, or 30% of the battery power you put into that commercial vehicle or bus, is used to overcome just the rolling resistance of the tires. So if we can offer you 10 or 20% improved rolling resistance, it means 3% or more less fuel, less battery charge for the same distance. That's more than they would spend on their whole tire budget in terms of cost savings for electric charge or for diesel. So tires can make a huge impact on people's operations if they make wise choices.
Ja, Markus, wie angekündigt, werden wir jetzt noch einen kleinen Blick in die neue Ausgabe der EAM 5 2024 werfen. Welche Themen sind denn diesmal im Magazin?
Ja, wie immer fangen wir mal mit dem Cover an. Und zwar haben wir da den Lotus Meya drauf, also die neue Sportlimousine von Lotus. Und natürlich sind wir das Auto gefahren, deswegen gibt es einen schönen Fahrbericht dazu. Aber es ist auch eingebettet in unser Performance-Spezial. Das heißt, wir haben über 16 Seiten dem Thema performante, spaßige, sportliche E-Fahrzeuge gewidmet, um einfach mal darzustellen, wie leistungsfähig eigentlich inzwischen Elektroautos sind. Und dass es natürlich nicht immer nur um reine Vernunft geht, sondern manchmal darf auch einfach mal der Spaß und die Freude am Auto da mitmachen. Mhm. Ja, etwas bodenständiger zeigt sich da unser Doppeltest. Den haben wir auch auf dem Cover drauf. Und zwar haben wir den BMW i5 gegen den VW ID.7 antreten lassen. Klar, die liegen preislich schon ein bisschen auseinander, aber wir wollten auch einfach mal sehen, wie viel Oberklasse kennt dann Wolfsburg und wie gut ist der ID.7, wenn man ihn eben gegen so einen Platzhirschen wie den i5 antreten lässt. Und ja, das Ergebnis daraus erfahrt ihr natürlich auch dann in der neuen Ausgabe. Dann haben wir auch mal wieder ein bisschen Zweirad drin, und zwar konnte ich die Zero DS testen. Das ist aktuell die stärkste und größte Maschine der 125er Klasse. Sieht auch auf den ersten Blick gar nicht so aus, wie man sich so einen 125er vorstellt. Warum das so ist, wie die sich fährt, was man damit alles machen kann, auch das erfahrt ihr in der neuen Ausgabe. Und natürlich haben wir nicht nur Fahrzeugthemen im Heft, sondern blicken auch wieder in das ganze Ökosystem ein bisschen rein. Deswegen stellen wir Wallboxen vor, die sich speziell für die Nutzung als Dienstwagen, also zum Aufladen von Dienstwagen und Fahrzeugflotten eignen. Da gibt es mal so ein paar Anforderungen, die man berücksichtigen sollte, wenn man sich eine Ladestation anschafft. Und in unserer Serie zur Energiewende haben wir uns diesmal das Thema Atomenergie angeschaut. Da wird ja auch immer wieder diskutiert, ob das nicht doch ein Comeback geben wird als CO2-arme oder CO2-neutrale Energiequelle. Wie die Chancen da stehen, beleuchten wir auch in der neuen Ausgabe.
Heißes Thema.
Absolut, ja, wurde gerade sehr brisant diskutiert. Und weil wir heute auch über die Elektro-Bus-Reifen gesprochen haben, da auch schon mal der Hinweis für unsere nächste Ausgabe, die 06 2024. Da werden wir ein Elektrobus-Spezial veröffentlichen. Und das ist dann, denke ich, auch nochmal ein ganz guter Anknüpfungspunkt hier heute zu unserem Podcast.
Mhm. Jetzt aber erstmal viel Spaß mit der aktuellen Ausgabe natürlich.
Genau. Und ja, dann freuen wir uns natürlich auch wieder, wenn ihr hier beim Podcast beim nächsten Mal wieder dabei seid. Bis dahin, ja, empfehlt uns gerne weiter, abonniert unsere Podcast auf euren Podcast-Playern. Wenn ihr uns da eine Bewertung geben wollt, dann ja, freuen wir uns natürlich auch darüber. Und dann, ja, bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.
Bis dann, ciao.